Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much for joining me here. Hope you're having a great day. We got a phenomenal update here for us. We had a nice little closure above this $112,000 mark for Bitcoin, signaling a good potential continuation to the upper 116K or higher. Obviously, we got a lot to look at here. We want to look at ETF net inflow, as well as some back-end CME futures here, some new gaps that are forming. So be sure to stick around. We got an important one today. Let's take a look. All right, folks, let's go ahead and get started here with our analysis. Just before, I'd like to preface here with, are you long or short? I asked that roughly an hour ago, 35 minutes ago, and we can see about 60% of you roughly are long, and some are not trading, some are short. When it comes to YouTube, though, crypto YouTube, we can see 65% of you, so a little more bullish on the YouTube side of things. I'm wondering if other influencers have anything to do with that. I don't really look at them. I have no idea what they're doing, but we have some memes that pop up in our community sometimes about how stupid and ridiculous their thumbnails are, and that is funny to me. But at this point, it does seem like we have flipped or shifted gears here. Essentially, we're up over 112,000 with Bitcoin. We closed at 112.2, so that's a very good start to the day here. So that's a good sign. Fair value gaps mostly filled. So let's jump into the back-end data first, kind of get perspective where we're at. First of all, altcoin season index is looking super strong. We can see our market cap is still maintaining above that $1.6 trillion mark. That is super huge. While some outliers here are not performing very well, majority of the ones that we do cover in these videos here are some of the better performing coins. And obviously we're going to identify those. But for the most part here, ETF net inflow is high for, well, Bitcoin a little bit. It's not that big considering, but for Ethereum, it's still massive. There's reasons why we're long on Ethereum right now, and I feel like we're in pretty good shape there with that consideration. But once more, it's never a perfect market, never exact. So just be very careful. Always use good, proper risk tolerance, or risk management rather. And obviously, your risk tolerance does develop over time. Consider demo trading too. I'm actually going to provide a new link to a new exchange here that offers demo trading on the first of the month. So be on the lookout for that. I'll go ahead and post that here soon. But CME gap here, of course, with Bitcoin is still unfilled, 114 to upwards of 116.8. So that rough estimate of a $3,000 range is still present. So I do think a run towards 117 is still possible. When we look at Ethereum, there's no CME gaps here, but Solana did create a new one. If you're wondering, wait a minute, it's not the weekend. How do we got a new CME gap? Well, truth is CME futures closes for an hour every day. It's like, what, 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern. So the concept there is that during that time frame, Solana was running and it hasn't filled that gap. So 201 to 204, that seems like an optimal consideration for long based on that psychological support range in the low 200s, right? That's just kind of where we're at there. Now, overall here with Bitcoin on the weekly, still looking pretty strong. Keep in mind, we still have somewhat of a divergence, but as the RSI continues to taper off and we see the price maintain its current range, that's actually a bullish type of convergence. Once more, this is a weekly time frame. Takes a while for this to develop, but we did have a bullish backtest of that 109K range, which was a previous high for roughly about 5 or 6 weeks. Okay, so that's a good sign ultimately, maintaining above that level. Looking at the overall here, mainly just focusing on the total 3, we can see that altcoins are performing decently well. They're pulling back a little bit over the last 8 hours, but generally speaking, outside of this here, with Ethereum pulling back too, obviously we saw a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction when Bitcoin retested, and obviously once more too, we can see Bitcoin dominance increasing as a result of that. So these all work pretty well in tandem. There's nothing that's a super massive outlier here. The key takeaway I would say is that altcoins are pulling back as money flows into stablecoin. So in a perfect world, stablecoin dominance pulls back, and we see altcoins continue to maintain or go higher effectively, if you will. All right, so let's take a quick look here at the backend data. First and foremost, we're going to start with Bitcoin and kind of go from there. Let's go ahead and get ourselves a fresh chart and kind of see where we're at. And when we look at Bitcoin, we want to understand too that like overall right now we can see somewhat of a potential shift in momentum, or more importantly, we have the average, basically true top traders. They are essentially taking just as many longs as they are shorts. Obviously, that number is a little different, but for the most part, they're both going sideways here, telling us in a lot of ways here that we're in a position where top traders using higher margin and essentially just taking longs and shorts at the same time. It tells us we're in really just simply put, we're in a transition, and until that transition, fully develops, we might want to expect the price to continue to kind of flounder in this 112K range. Now, top traders, that doesn't mean too much. It just kind of gives us a perspective on where the big money is at. Right now, we can see here that whales are still fairly quiet. And for the most part here with our volume delta based on open interest, we can recognize institutional traders are also tapering off where retail is still consistent. So most people are FOMOing in, so to speak. Let's take a look here at Bitcoin open interest and recognize that once more, 115K is that local resistance. I'm rounding up a little bit. It's more like 114.6. That's that previous high that held as a low until we saw a massive dump from the whales, right? We had those two whales that sold like $2.6 billion in Bitcoin within about a 3-day period, and that all sent everything down here. Now that Michael Saylor's buying, effectively, we're seeing the price going back up. All that said, we're shifting our delta here to potentially break even. We're at about 2 billion in the red, essentially just letting us know that shorts are starting to close their positions, longs are starting to open, and or shorts are getting stopped out, one of the two. But the key here is that we're seeing that shift in momentum occur. Furthermore, we look at liquidation, we can see 114 is that next chunk of liquidation with a little bit at 114.5. So it would seem sensible for us to see that 114.5 area here soon. And if we do take a look here, of course, as well at the larger time, we can see 117, really close to 117 is that next area of liquidation. So once more, 115 is the initial barrier there, and then obviously we got that 117 resistance wall. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I don't think we got to worry about that just yet, but we have some confluence in the 114K range. So take a look at the daily. To recognize this for Bitcoin, we are still in a descending trend. We were below moving averages. It's hard to be bullish in this coin right now. Okay, now obviously these descending trends are subjective, of course. I typically like to draw them out concurrent with moving averages, and our moving averages haven't really started to pull back or to retrace just yet. So all that being said, we take a look at the overall circumstances here with our oscillators and indicators. We can recognize we're still under 50 on the RSI. Stochastic swinging up, yes, that is great. We had a double bottom there effectively, and money flow index bouncing off that 20 to 30 range. Those are ultimately good things to look for when you want to consider a long position with a coin. So I do like what I see there in that sense. MACD is trying to converge as well. So we got some early indications of a trend reversal, but when it comes to previous highs and lows, etc., being above this 112K range is super important. So I think that if we maintain above 112, that we're going to see altcoins continue to flourish, and we're going to be in pretty good shape. But all in all, at this point, it's still a little premature to tell. But I would say that we're leaning more towards the price going higher than lower. All right. And once more, I'll update our playout chart and I'll post that on our Twitter, Telegram, and Discord for you. Those are available for you at any given time. I post those once a day at least. So that's kind of where we're at there with Bitcoin. Let's move on to Ethereum and kind of recognize here the back end data for Ethereum is as follows. We've got this massive buy wall here at 4,500. That is that open interest area. Okay, so it basically implies that we have a lot of support there. And once more, Ethereum's kind of nice. It's making it easy for us. Very, very close to these round numbers is where we see these open interest areas. So technically 4380 and 4280 is where we see those, but round numbers 4300, 4400, and 4500 are good DCA targets for Ethereum if it were to continue to pull back. That's essentially where I have my second and or tertiary entry for our long position on Ethereum. We're long in the rough estimate about 4500. So the concept here is that these areas of open interest will provide a lot of support. A lot of ETF inflow into Ethereum is a good sign overall, especially with money pulling back for Bitcoin. While we do see a little bit of a capitulation here for Ethereum today, it's nothing to really worry about. It's that natural profit taking based on this coin being still fairly well overextended. We can see liquidation delta is still in the red. We're at about 10 billion in short liquidation delta, which basically just tells us people are taking more shorts than longs with this coin. But I think that's kind of foolhardy because this coin has tremendous potential to continue higher. It's been, in most cases, 2x of Bitcoin on the way up when it pulls back, or only 1x when it pulls back, but 2x the upside. So it's generally a good little consideration for a long. I would still recommend considering longs versus shorts with this coin. However, let's not get too naive here, right? We can see this descending type of trend here, essentially, letting us know that we are still establishing lower highs, right? So lower highs and higher lows, we're starting to compress into this range with our moving averages. A breakout is more inevitable here in this case. So overall, I still like what I see with Ethereum here. But the truth is, outside of some backend data, the macro is still looking pretty good, but the lower timeframes are starting to diverge a little bit, and that's pretty standard when it comes to Bitcoin and how it keeps kind of dumping in these small little instances. Like we went from like 113 to 112 a moment ago, and a lot of altcoins kind of was like, oh my gosh, let's run for the hills. But I wouldn't do that honestly, because this coin is really good about shaking people out. All right, cool. So that's kind of where we're at there, Ethereum. I'm still bullish on Ethereum. Taking a look here at Solana, also tentatively bullish on this one, based on the fact that we are retesting our previous high range here of 209 to 210. Now, if I recall correctly, we had some liquidation above the price. Some of that has been swept, but let's take a look at open interest. There's a ton of support between 208 and 205. So even though we could see that CME gap, by the way, I kind of glossed over this but didn't go into detail. There's a CME gap between 201 and 204 on Solana. That CME gap could very well get filled. And if so, I feel like the low 200s is an optimal consideration for long. But between now and then, there's not a lot of reasons here as to why you should consider shorting. And also, you may miss the boat if you wait for a long in that area, right? So always best to kind of consider averaging in. Liquidation delta is at 2 billion to the upside, and we got some liquidation upwards about 220. So further higher makes more sense than going lower based on this back end data here. Now take a look here at more so the front end, the daily time frame. Solana's been bullish for quite some time, so nothing really here has changed. If we look at our MACD, it's still converging, and if we are kind of looking at our RSI, which to me is a very important gauge of overall strength, we've been over 50 for a while. Unlike majority of other coins, we haven't lost that support range, and we have the money flow index increasing with it. So those are all complementing factors, letting us know that further upside makes tremendous amount more sense. Now, when we take a look here, RSI is not overextended, which is great. More further potential for upside. Money flow index also above the price with a slight stochastic swing to the downside. So all this stuff combined here leads me to believe we're probably more likely to continue higher, especially if Bitcoin closes over 112,000 today. So once more, we maintain that range, 112 to 113 for Bitcoin. Stronger altcoins, specifically the top 10 market cap coins, they're going to be continuing higher, or even you could even say the top 25, top 50. Most of the top coins here, large market cap coins, are responding very well to this continuation for Bitcoin. So I'm bullish on Solana too, even though once more we could actually see a pullback to the low 200s. If so, I'd welcome that. All right, so take a look here at SUI. Let's jump in the back end and kind of recognize where we're at. We've talked about this previously, 350 being somewhat of a resistance wall here based on open interest. So if we kind of make it a little more clear, we got a lot of support at 340, resistance at 350, and then of course that typical 380 range above. So a bit of a gap there, if you will. So more likelihood of the price breaking out, but also if you look at this here, there's so much bearish activity. This coin is like super bearish. It doesn't make a ton of sense to take a long into this type of pattern. And I'll show you the pattern I'm referring to here shortly. It looks more like a bearish type of flag pattern. Once more, you don't trade flag patterns or anything exclusively, but if you have a flag pattern and a significant bearish divergence on the charts, then that complements those factors and you may want to consider a short. I don't love shorting this coin personally, but this coin has been kind of stalling out, for lack of better terms. We got liquidation at 360. And let's quickly double check here. First of all, we're in a descending trend on the 4-hour time frame. It's a little easier to notice, but you can kind of see this type of bearish divergence here. We can kind of recognize that we're in a descending type of trend, right? And also working ourselves into a bearish type of flag pattern. So these do typically break to the downside, right? So for the most part, you're going to see continuation lower once it caps out. We are starting to see this 0.618 fib level at 350 and the point of control here working as a strong resistance. So if you're going to have any luck in shorting a coin, this coin, I would say in general has a better propensity to continue lower. We're under all moving averages minus the 200, which is down in the low threes, which is fine. MACD is still diverging. We're under 50 on the RSI. There's more bearish divergences on this coin and more statistical favorability of further downside than upside on this coin. So I don't love what I see here. This coin is very underperforming, underwhelming, so to speak. While we have one outlier here with a close so far above the 20-day SMA, you don't take trades based on hopes and prayers, right? That's basically what this is. We've already determined that 90% or higher of all the factors that we tend to look for when taking a short position is all present here. So 101 makes two. You go ahead and tell me what your thoughts are. Why don't you comment below if you think that if perhaps you think differently. I totally understand if you do. It's all good. You know, there's no right answer, honestly. But for the most part, there's way more resistance here, and unless we see some kind of magical run towards like 116K for Bitcoin like today, we're probably going to see SUI lag out. It's very underwhelming right now. Moving on to Chainlink, let's quickly recognize this guy here. The backend data is interesting. There's so much open interest in the backend that it's kind of confusing in a lot of ways, right? So people are just adding like crazy between the $24 and $27 range. Right now, we got a resistance wall at about 26, and 24.50 is that potential support now for us. Keep in mind this coin, and I forgot to mention this earlier, there is speculation that the US Department of Commerce is partnering with Chainlink to bring the government macroeconomic data on chain. Well, whether or not this is legitimate or not, I don't know. Perhaps you can clarify if you know more about it, but that's a fundamental catalyst, folks. Typically, when you see this kind of volume, it shoots up, and that's kind of where we're at. So the concept here, the reason why I bring that to your attention is because we got a lot of resistance above the price. This coin is more likely to go lower than higher as of yesterday's analysis. So let's see if that's changed. Keep in mind, fundamental catalysts are not really my favorite thing to try to trade into. Looking here though, 27 is that heavy area of open interest, sorry, heavy area of liquidation above the price. If we look at the overall chart here, the 4-hour time frame is still holding below. We saw a pretty obvious rejection at this $26 range. So all in all, not a really good chart here to try to trade into. If you do end up taking along, just know there's a higher risk of, I wouldn't say failure, but fundamental catalysts, it's likely getting stalled out here. That was like a good catch. If you caught that $26 short, that would be awesome. I think I'm still leaning more towards shorting this coin. And the reason why, even though the macro looks pretty decent, the 4-hour is still struggling. And you got to recognize that the 4-hour time frame is one of those time frames that allows you to, it takes a handful of good 4-hour time frame confirmations to get to that daily, that macro. So even though the daily time frame is still looking semi-bullish, the 4-hour time frame, I don't really like this. There's a lot more confluence and or resistance above the price, specifically with volume. Obviously, it depends on how far out you zoom, but if we look at the last 2 weeks alone, we have a tremendous amount of volume at about 25 to 26, 25.50 to 26. So that area in itself is a strong resistance wall. So I'm not recommending you short this coin per se. Just be careful if you take it long. I think that's the better recommendation there because it's hard to account for these things. But I really think we only saw that pump there because of that fundamental catalyst, that post of the U.S. government and Chainlink combining together. Just like when you see all these dumb idiots on XRP, for example, which is what we're going to look at now, talking about how amazing the coin is. Just literally, if anyone posts only XRP content on their channel, I don't think you should trust them at all. It's just me personally. Again, I'm a technical analyst solely, but fundamentals on this coin are pretty ridiculous. And I really don't think we're going to go to the metaphorical moon anytime soon. Obviously, we see some adoption there, maybe a different story, but that's kind of where we're at there. Okay. I've said my piece. So let's take a look here at the backend data for XRP. So a ton of resistance between basically 310, 315 now, and 330. So if you're going to consider securing profits, this 315 to 316 range is a good consideration. For our XRP long, that's roughly where our take profit target is. I may consider adjusting it a little bit lower because I don't really like the price action here so far. But we are starting to break even with our liquidation delta, sometimes telling us there's a shift in momentum. And with there being an exceptionally large amount of liquidation above the price versus the below, that leads me to believe that shorts may actually get squeezed out here soon. So even though there's not a whole lot of confirming factors here telling us we're going to go, parabolic with this coin, which is so stupid to even think about in the first place, we can recognize here that 302 and roughly 307, you could approximate that to about 305, is a resistance wall for us here in this coin. So we have all moving averages kind of hanging out there, at least the important ones here. And we also got a lot of volume right in that range. So the concept here remains true in the fact that the daily time frame is, for the most part, break even. It keeps retesting this resistance, but has yet to break. We do have a slight increase in money flow index, which is good. More money's flowing into this coin at this price point of $3. But when we look at the 4-hour time frame, the fair value gap has been filled, and we are maintaining above the moving averages here at about 295. So I guess the easy way to understand it is this coin is in transition, generally not the best conditions to consider a trade, because the 4 hour looks like it wants to break bearish. It's starting to lose momentum. The daily time frame's also showing that it wants to break bullish. So it's like you got a lot of conflicting factors. That's the best consideration, to leave it alone. All right. Don't force a trade because you feel like this is your favorite coin, and you're so pleased and so happy to know that this coin is in your bag. That's all well and good. Don't get me wrong. It's okay to be slightly prideful, but to be ridiculous and dumbfounded because you are following the wrong people, just please keep in mind, from a technical perspective, there's nothing exciting about this coin, okay? And that's just the way it is. I'm always going to shoot you straight and be honest with you, and truth is, I don't think there's a lot of transparency out there. I've got a lot of comments recently talking about how appreciative they are about just my straightforward analysis. I'm not going to be, I'm never a biased trader specifically. And honestly, trading without bias is the best thing you could do for yourself too, outside of proper risk tolerance and not being an emotional idiot. But once more, bias, emotionals, or emotion, those things all go hand in hand. So do yourself a favor, take a walk if you're feeling emotional, go exercise, go do something constructive. Walk away from the charts every once in a while. It's okay to do that. I hope you have a good rest of your day, though. I want to say thank you again for being an amazing part of my life. You're all very wonderful people. Thanks so much for always liking the content, subscribing, etc. And if you want to become a better trader, CryptoCash.tech is a site, link down below. Join us over on our Discord too. We got a pretty active Discord here. A lot of fun in this area. Anyways, I hope you all have a good one. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.